Composition is a mystery to many artists, beginner and professionals alike, and I'm going to tell you why. See, composition is a lot like color theory in that the hard and fast rules get easily disrupted by the way each of us processes information, leaving us with a set of rules that can easily and beautifully be broken. Composition, in ways, becomes a lot like our own creative thumbprint. But for beginners, the seemingly endless ways to arrange a painting can feel daunting, to say the least. So today, I'm walking you through the decision-making process as I build a watercolor composition. And you might recognize the parts that I'm going to use to build this artwork. You might want to check out this video below where I show you how to sketch and paint all of these flowers. I'll link it for you. And that's right, friends, today is not a how-to video in terms of brush and paper and paint. Today is a how-to in terms of arrangement, style, and composition. Here's a look at the elements I'll be using today to build this piece of art. I've got filler flowers, sweet pea, all sorts of loveliness, and of course that anemone. I won't be using them all, but most. Get ready for some Christy creative stream of consciousness, because that's what you're going to get. I'm not going to be talking about rules and science and all the things. I'm going to be talking about what's in my head as I work through this. And I invite you to comment if there's something that I mentioned that you think I could have done better or in a different way that might have made this composition stronger. Going in lightly with my pencil and mapping out basic shapes. Big old circle. I'm already thinking ahead, probably going to use that anemone because it was my favorite in the first video and it still is today. And then some smaller filler flowers up here to the right. I'm not really thinking of a specific approach to composition. If you watched the video I'm going to link below recently about the Fibonacci Spiral and the rule of thirds, I'm not really thinking about that yet. I'm thinking more just about basic balance and a focal point that's off center. I'm even making some pencil sketch marks here that are going to indicate maybe some areas that'll have tendrils or vines, and mapping out the center of my flower as well. Going in now and just further detailing in some petals for the anemone. This is not my entire composition. There's much more to come, but I get easily distracted and I like to work in a way that kind of feeds into that because it makes me feel good. And so adding these petals, more definition, and working them out at this point before mapping out the rest of the composition just makes sense for me. And I'm thinking because this anemone is going to be my focal point, I really want to establish its form really strongly right up front. That just kind of makes sense in my head. And it also made sense, I just go ahead and keep detailing in these blue flowers from the original elements that I'm choosing from here and adding more structure. And then now I'm finally heading down into kind of that bottom left corner to map out a little more. I just think this incremental way of approaching building a composition makes a lot of sense for some of us who are a little bit more free-spirited. Now, if you're a little more type A, and that's a beautiful thing, nothing wrong with that, you're probably going to want to map out the whole thing with really soft, basic shapes that you can erase and move around if need be. You do you. All right, I'm going in right now with my pen, and yeah, I know, it's crazy because again, I'm not done with this composition. I know right now, even in this mapping stage, that I'm going to be adding more. But I still feel like I want the strength and the structure of those pen lines early. And it just makes sense for me to continue on with this pen over top of the pencil and get that all structured in and see how I feel. Because right now this spray actually feels pretty, it's floating on the page. It's definitely not a finished piece of artwork at this point. But for this session, I could choose to stop right here. But because we're really delving into composition, I'm going to keep going. But this is a little bit of a creative mental health tip that has nothing to do with composition, but it's important just the same. You don't have to finish mapping out or finish all of the line work, ink work, anything. Any part of your painting, you can stop at any point. Like right now, I could stop and come back to it tomorrow. Because honestly, if I don't have a clear direction for the next move I'll make at this point, then I don't want to make it necessarily. Or maybe I just want to work on something totally different from this, swatch out some colors, and kind of clear my brain a little bit. So yeah, the tip is be okay with setting something aside and coming back to it later. feeling confident now, so I'm just going right in with that pen and continuing to map out the composition. And I feel like I want to incorporate some of these filler kind of twirly grasses into the composition. So I'm doing that right now. And again, friends, remember, find the link below to learn the how-to of actually drawing all of these elements. Now in this moment, I've kind of decided for sure that I'm not going to attempt to fill this whole page today. Where I stopped today with mapping out this composition, it's definitely going to leave me kind of a floating spray of flowers on the page. But what I'm focusing on with what I'm left with today is that my focal point is clear. So that's the number one goal of this compositional exercise today, a clear focal point. And I'm really pleased with the fact that the anemone is clearly that. Number two, I want to make sure that all the supporting elements are balanced. And balance in composition can come from color usage, it can come from light and dark, shadows, highlights, and today it's a little bit more of the third way that you can get balance in the composition, and that is the size and kind of the perspective of the shapes that you use. All right, walking you through this final composition for today. In the middle, you've got your star, the focal point. Then we've got these pointed flowers in the upper right. And those are definitely kind of a secondary element. My eye is going to those easily second. And then you've got the spray of filler stuff in that bottom left-hand corner. And then you've got some just random leaves at the bottom underneath the anemone, and you've got some sweet pea kind of curling back towards those pointed flowers in the upper right. But all of it is supporting that center focal point flower. If I could stop right now and erase this ink, let me tell you what I would change. I'd make one of those pointed flowers in the upper right a little bit bigger, just one of them. And it would probably only be about 30% bigger. And the reason I feel that way is because right now, those three pointed petal flowers look very similar in scale to the filler in the bottom right corner. And for me, that's not quite as strong of a compositional decision as I would like. Friends, I have to know, do you enjoy it when I critique myself, when I literally call out on screen mistakes I think I'm making? Is that helpful for you? I'd love to know. Head to the comment section and tell me all about it. And you know what I'm going to say, because, while you're at it, while we're taking a pause here, if you're learning anything today or having aha moments, I would love if you give this video a boop. And friends, in Christyland, that is a like, and it really helps out my channel and helps others out there in the YouTube land find this channel when they're searching for watercolor and all the things. I mentioned earlier that there's three ways, and honestly there's more than three, but there's three key ways that you can create balance in a composition. One, through the use of color, two, through the use of contrast, light and dark, and three, the use of scale. Now, as I'm adding the watercolor to this composition, I am thinking about my composition still. I'm trying not to get completely lost in the color of it all. Now, luckily, I have my original elements that I painted previously to work from, and I'm basically keeping the colors the same from that. So that's helping me make some decisions. Actually, it's helping me not make any decisions. Remember, I painted all of these elements in a video a few months back. It's linked below. I'm using all of those color decisions in this composition, but let me explain why I didn't change any of the colors. Let me explain why it works. Okay, first up, I chose a color palette that has soft versions of colors overall. So when you look at this, it feels soft and pastel. But I've added a few touches in the green areas and in the blue areas especially that are a little bit darker and a little bit more saturated, giving the color palette some depth. And that really works for the composition. Number two, contrast. And the contrast here, friends, is primarily coming from that white anemone. So making that white anemone the focal point is one thing, and that's a great decision. But supporting details behind that white anemone, like the green leaves, like some of the blue flowers touching one of the white petals, that's adding contrast. And that is really supporting our goal of making that white anemone pop as the focal point. And number three, scale. So the size of everything. The focal point flower is obviously larger than anything else on the page, probably by about 35 to 40%. Don't quote me, I'm not a math gal, but you know what I mean. And I mentioned earlier, I wished one of those blue flowers were a little bit bigger, but in general, they are slightly larger than the spray filler leaves and buds in the bottom left corner. So scale is working here. It's not working quite as strongly as I had planned, but we're going with it. Now that we have a handle on the more emotional or intuitive side of composition, I want you to learn a little bit more about the science, Christy science, behind composition and why it works and when it doesn't. So watch this video next and you will be good to go. And until next time, friends, I wish you happy painting.